I now bitterly repented the fate that had put such an accursed power into my hands, making me the means of wreaking vengeance by doing hurt to life and property. I had come here in search of the saving truth, and here I was again being asked to work harm and do an evil deed. If I refused, I should be disobeying a guru, or at least one whom I intended to take for my guru, almost as heinous a sin as to refuse to obey an actual guru. And in addition, I should lose all opportunity of obtaining the teachings. And so I decided that I must go and that I had no choice. Accordingly, I set forth, provided with the necessary appurtenances, and reaching the scene of my intended deed, I took lodgings in the house of an old woman in the Yupo country. Just as the hailstorm was about to burst, as the lightnings flashed and the thunder growled, and the first hailstones were about to fall, the old woman, my hostess, began to beat her breast and weep, saying, "Alas, what shall I have to live on if my crops are destroyed by the hail?" This was too much for me. I could not bear to be so cruel to this poor old woman. So, at imminent risk to myself, I requested her to quickly draw me a plan of her field. "Oh, my field is like this," she cried in a despairing tone, at the same time describing a triangular figure with an elongated end. I immediately covered the figure with an iron pan in my mind, shielding it from the hail, so that it escaped destruction, all except a tiny corner which, protruding beyond the covering pan, was devastated by a gust of wind. When the storm was over, on going out to look at the country, I saw the slopes above the valley all furrowed into ravines, the erstwhile luxuriant fields utterly laid waste, all except the old woman's field, which was quite fresh and green. But that corner of the field, corresponding to the corner of the plan which, protruding beyond the covering pan, had been devastated by wind, was damaged by the hail and flooded with water. Ever afterward, this field, except for its protruding corner which had been flooded, escaped any hailstorm which visited that neighborhood. And it is said that the old woman was thus exempted from payment of the hail tax on all of the field save that corner. On my way back to my new guru, I met an old shepherd and his child who had lost their herds in the flood. By them I sent word to the people of the countryside, enjoining them to refrain thenceforth from ill-treating or robbing Lama Gopa's disciples or adherents, on pain of being visited constantly by similar hailstorms, thus revealing to them who had caused the destruction. After this, the people of those two places were so profoundly impressed with the phenomenal power of Lama Gopa that they became his devoted followers and faithfully served him. As I came along the way, I picked up some dead birds, which I found all by themselves under a bramble bush, and numbers of other birds and some rats, which I found dead on the road, until I had my cap and my lap of my robe full. These I laid in the heap before Lama Gopa and appealed to him thus: "O reverend teacher, I came here expecting to find the holy doctrine, but have been compelled to heap up sin upon sin. Have pity on such a terrible sinner." And I burst into bitter tears. To this the Lama replied, "Be not despairing. There is no cause whatsoever for such abject fear. We, the followers of Naropa and Maitreya, possess those truths which can save the greatest of sinners in the twinkling of an eye, just as one single stone flung from a sling serveth to frighten 100 birds simultaneously. All those sentient creatures and these birds and beasts which have been killed on this occasion by the hailstorm shall be born again as thy foremost disciples when thou shalt attain to Buddhahood. Till that time cometh, I shall put forth my power so as to prevent their falling into hell or degenerating into lower states of being. Therefore be at ease. But if thou still doubt, let me prove the truth of what I say thus." For a few moments he sat silent with closed eyes. Then he snapped his fingers, In a trice, all the dead birds and rats which I had collected revived, and made off to their several nests and holes. I now perceived that the Lama himself was a Buddha. How delightful and how blissful! I should have rejoiced had many more creatures enjoyed the privilege of dying on such an occasion. Thereafter, I was initiated into the rite of the Gepa Dorje. I had found a cave facing south in which I could see my guru's residence, and having made it habitable by the expenditure of a little labor, I shut myself up in it, leaving only a small aperture in the side for the passage of food and water, and so forth. My guru had explained to me the methods of meditation, and I persevered in their practice. But despite all the assiduity on the guru's part and perseverance on my own, owing to my not having obtained the assent of Marpa, I experienced no spiritual development. One day my guru came and asked me if I had had such and such an experience. I replied that I had experienced nothing of the like nature. "How is that?" he asked. "Is this line of development there ought not to be, and there have never been any who have not within a very short time made fresh progress in spiritual development, except when there hath been something standing directly in the way of it. What can it be here? It cannot be that our head guru hath not given his assent to thine initiation, or else he would not have sent the tokens in the letter. Well, anyway, proceed with thy meditation." I was a little alarmed at this encounter, and for a moment thought of confessing to the deception I had practiced, but my courage failed me. Now more than ever was I impressed with the necessity of propitiating my head guru, the Lama Marpa, but I went on practicing meditation to the best of my ability. About this time, Lama Marpa, having had the remaining portion of his son's residence completed, wrote to Lama Gopa requesting him to send him so many loads of small branches for the house. The letter added that upon the completion of the ornamental spires in the cornice, Lama Gopa was to come in person and assist both in the consecration of the house and the ceremony to be performed at the same time to celebrate the coming of age of Dode Bum, the Marpa's son. The letter also intimated that Lama Marpa had heard about my being with Lama Gopa, reference being made to me as a wicked person, and it requested I should be brought back to him at the same time. So Lama Gopa came to the aperture of my cave and read me the letter, observing, "From the manner in which the Lama speaketh of thee, it would appear that thou hast not obtained his permission in regard to the bestowal of the truth." I replied, "The Lama himself did not give his consent, but his wife furnished me with the letter and the accompanying tokens, with which I was directed hither." "Ah," he said, "so we have been engaged in profitless work. Thou surely must have known that it is vain to hope for spiritual growth without the Guru's hearty cooperation and approval. It is no wonder thou dost not develop any of the signs. However, he ordereth thee to return. Dost thou wish to go or not?" I prayed that I might be taken with him as his attendant. He replied that the branches had been sent by carriers, and that until these had returned and the exact date of the festival known, I was to remain in my retreat. Upon the return of the carriers, he again came to the aperture of my cell, whereupon we had a long conversation about our Guru's approaching ceremonial of consecrating the building and bestowing it upon his son, who was also to have a distinction conferred upon him. In the course of our talk, I inquired whether any mention had been made of myself, and Gopa said, "Yes, our Lama's lady asked the carriers what thou wert doing. Being told that thou wert in retreat, she asked what else thou wert doing here. Being told that thou didst always cling to solitude, she set it down to thy having left this dye behind, at the same time giving it to the man and helping him to tie it up in his waistcloth, and charging him to deliver it safely into thy hands. Gopa then handed me a die made of clay. I took it from his hand reverentially, and deeming that it had been hallowed by the touch of my reverend mother, I put it on my head. When he had left me, I was taken with a desire to throw the die and play with it. But after a few moments, the thought occurred to me that I had never manifested any weakness for dice playing in the lady's presence, and I asked myself what she could mean by sending me a thing that had led to the impoverishment of some of mine ancestors. Was it not meant to show that I was an object of contempt to her? The thought was infuriating, and in a rage I threw the die on the ground with such force that it split asunder and revealed a small roll of paper wrapped up inside. I picked this up and read its message, which ran thus: Son, thy guru is now disposed to bestow upon thee the necessary initiation in scriptures. Therefore come with Lama Gopa. This was such welcome news to me that I actually pranced up and down my little cave and danced for very joy. Lama Gopa then came and said, Brave grand sorcerer, prepare thyself for the journey. And I did so with alacrity. The Lama himself collected everything he possessed for an offering, except what had been given him by Marpa himself. These possessions consisted of images, books, relics, gold, turquoise, cloth, silk, plate, vessels, livestock, and so on. Of the latter he drove off every sheep and goat in his possession, leaving behind but one lame old she-goat, which on account of its lameness was unable to keep up with the rest of the herd, and so perforce had to be left behind. Everything else he possessed he was preparing to take with him as an offering to his guru. He was kind enough to acknowledge the service I had rendered to him, and gave me a silk scarf as mine own offering to Lama Marpa. His wife added to it a bag full of powdered cheese, which was to serve as mine offering to Marpa's lady, Damima. Then Lama Gopa, together with his wife and myself and a large retinue, set out for Dawalung, that is, the Marpa's monastery. When we had arrived at the foot of the hill on which Dawalung stood, the Lama requested me to go in advance and inform Lama Marpa and Damima of his approach, and to see if they would not send out some Chang for him. Accordingly, I went up towards Marpa's dwelling, and there encountered his lady first. I presented her with a bag of cheese and saluted her with reverence. I then informed her of the approach of Lama Gopa and asked her to send some refreshments to meet him on his approach. She was delighted to see me and told me to go and pay my respects to Lama Marpa, who was inside, and to tell him of Lama Gopa's approaching arrival. I then entering the dwelling and found Lama Marpa sitting in meditation on the topmost story of the house. I presented the silk scarf to him and bowed down before him, he being seated facing the east. He turned his face to the west. Then I bowed down from the west, but he turned round towards the south. Then I spoke and said, Reverend Guru, although out of displeasure thou refused to accept my obeisance, Lama Gopa is coming here with all he possesseth of images and gold and such, as an offering to thee. He surely deserveth some suitable reception befitting his state. I therefore pray that thou wilt be kind enough to send some Chang and refreshments out to him on his way hither. Apparently bursting out in rage, the Lama snapped his fingers and shouted, What? Who gaveth me a reception when I came plodding home with a load of precious teachings on my back from India? When I brought home the precious gems of the quintessence of all 4 divisions of Buddhist doctrine, did so much as a lame bird come out to greet me or receive me? And must I, a great translator, go and receive Gopa just because he is bringing me a few straggling cattle? No, it cannot be. If that be what he expecteth, he had better go back whence he came. I left the Lama's presence and went and told his lady what he had said. Oh, she said, thy guru is very testy. Gopa is a great man and must be received in a befitting manner. Let us both go and meet him. I said, Lama, Gopa doth not expect thee to go and meet him. Only give me a little Chang, and I will run back with it to him. No, I will go and meet him, she said. And ordering some pupils to bring a generous quantity of Chang, she went out personally to receive Lama Gopa. Now all the people of Lobrak had assembled together to celebrate the coming of age of Marpa's son, Dharmadule, and to witness the ceremony of consecrating the house which had been built for him. There was a general feast, and Lama Marpa raised his voice and sang the benedictory psalm as a blessing upon the congregation and the occasion. It ran as follows. I supplicate the gracious Guru, on this the glorious sect of my line, resteth the blessing of stainlessness. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On the short pathway of my truths profound, resteth the blessing of unerringness. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On myself, Marpa the translator, resteth the blessing of learning deep. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On Guru, Deva, and Dakini, resteth the blessing of grace and favor. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On my spiritual sons and sishas, the disciples gathered here, resteth the blessing of staunch and true faith. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On all my lay disciples, far and near, resteth the blessing of charity and merit. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On all pure deeds and actions, resteth the blessing of altruism and emancipation. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On good and evil spirits of this transient world, resteth the blessing of great merit or great punishment. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. On these lamas and these laymen gathered here, resteth the blessing of gladness and good wishes. May the benediction of that blessing here alight. When the Marpa had ended, Lama Gopa rose up and offered his gifts, after which he addressed Marpa in the following words. Precious and reverend Guru, I do not need to say that all I have and am is thine. On this present occasion, however, I beg leave to announce to thee that everything I possess, save one lame old she-goat, too lame and too old to keep up with the rest of the herd, which therefore I had to leave behind, hath been brought hither as an offering to thee, in return for which I pray that thou wilt confer upon me thine ever-devoted Sisha, the most precious initiations and the deepest mystic truths, and above all the scrolls containing those esoteric truths that are to be whispered in the ear only. So saying, he prostrated himself before the well-pleased Marpa, who now spoke as follows. Well, if this be so, I in turn have to inform thee that the truths and scriptures I possess are among the rarest and most efficacious. They belong mostly to that class of truths called the shortcut of the immutable path, by means of which it is possible to attain nirvana in this very lifetime, without having to wait for countless ages. Such are the surpassing virtues of these truths. But there is more. The truths contained in the scrolls of which thou speakest are attended by certain very strict conditions of the Guru's requiring. So unless thou bring up the last she-goat, despite all her lameness and old age, thine acquisition of that scripture will be a matter of some difficulty. As for the others, thou hast already received them. This last requirement evoked hearty laughter from all present. But Lama Gopa gravely asked if, when the old she-goat were brought up, he would be given the scripture he desired. To this Marpa replied, Yes, if thou go thyself and fetch it. The assembly then broke up for the day, and the next morning Lama Gopa set forth by himself to get the lame she-goat, and bringing it on his own back, he offered it to the Marpa, who, much pleased, said, "A really devoted and faithful follower of the mystic truth should be like thyself. I have truly little use for a lame old she-goat. I only made requisition for it in order to illustrate the greatness and value of religious truths." He then promised Lama Gopa that he would initiate him into various mystic truths and mandalas, and after a short time after did so. On the next day, during a feast given to some of his disciples from the most distant parts and to the members of his own family, Lama Marpa sat with a long staff by his side, looking with fierce eyes at Lama Gopa, who was one of those present. After a time, pointing at him with his finger, he said, "Godanchudor, what explanation hast thou to give in the matter of thy having conferred initiation in the truths upon this wicked person, Thopaga?" As he spoke, he kept glancing at his stick. Lama Gopa was terrified, and he stammered, "Precious Guru, thy reverence enjoin me under thine own hand and seal to initiate Thopaga, this Milarepa. Along with the letter, thy reverence set Naropa's garlands and rosary of rubies as a token of its genuineness. Now I obeyed thy reverence' command. In this I have nothing which to be reproached myself, so be pleased to abate thy reverence' displeasure with me." As he spoke, he kept looking around about uneasily. Marpa then turned his angry finger on me and asked, "Where didst thou get these things?" By this time I felt as if my heart were being torn out of my body, and was in such a state of terror that I could scarcely articulate. All trembling, I faltered out that the Lady Mother had given them to me. At that, Marpa jumped up abruptly from his seat and made towards his wife, apparently with the intent to belabor her with the staff. But she, apprehensive of such a thing, had risen and moved herself some distance from him, and she now ran into the chapel and shut the door. The Lama made several attempts to open it, but failing, came back and resumed his seat, calling out, "Thy Godanchudor, who hast been doing something thou wert not asked to do, I command thee to go and bring me Naropa's garlands and rosary instantly." This said, he wrapped up his head in his mantle, and so remained. Lama Gopa bowed and retired immediately to get the articles required. As soon as he came out, I, having run out of Marpa's presence at the same time as the lady, saw him from a corner where I sat weeping, and I prayed him to take me with him. But he said, "If I take thee again without the Guru's express command, the outcome will only be a similar scene, which will be painful to both. Remain here for the present. If our Guru refuse to be gracious to thee, I will then do what lieth in my power to help thee." Then I rejoined, "On account of my much evil doing, not only do I myself suffer, but I involve thee and my reverend mother in a share of my troubles. I have lost all hope of obtaining the doctrine in this life. Day by day I am only heaping up one great sin upon another. It is much better that I cut short this life. All I ask of thee is that by thy grace thou procure that my next birth shall be among well-endowed human beings, and be a birth in which I shall have the opportunity to obtain the highest truth." I turned away, intending to commit suicide on the spot, but Lama Gopa, bursting into tears, caught hold of me and said, "Brave grand sorcerer, do not so. Our mystic doctrine, which is the essence and ultimate meaning of the blessed Conqueror's injunctions, declareth that all various bodily principles and faculties are divine. If we presume to close their present career before their natural period of dissolution, we incur the guilt of killing the divine in ourselves, and must face the due punishment for the same. There is no greater sin than suicide. In the sutras, too, suicide is spoken of as a most heinous sin. Understand this well and abandon all thought of self-slaughter. After all, our Guru may still be pleased to confer the truths upon thee. But even if ye do not, there will surely be found someone who will give them thee. Thus did Gopa seek to comfort me. Others of the disciples also sympathized with me, some running in to see if Marpa were yet in a mood to be addressed with safety, and some sitting down by me and trying to bring me solace. But either my heart was made of iron, or else the time had come for it to break, so acute were my sufferings. It was because of my having committed such terribly wicked deeds in the earlier part of my life that now I had to suffer such excruciating and indescribable tortures at the very outset of my search for a faith and doctrine to emancipate me. At the hearing of this narration, none present was able to withhold tears of sympathy with the narrator, and some there were who even swooned away with excess of emotion. This is the story of the second meritorious act of Milarepa, which treateth of his chastening and his purification from sin by means of trials and tribulations, both bodily and mental.